Pierre Peter Ortiz was one of the most decorated U.S. Marines in World War II. His biography puts fictional characters like James Bond to shame, as his life was rich and full of adventure. Born in New York City, Ortiz was of French descent on his father's side and American descent on his mother's. He received his education at the French University of Grenoble and was fluent in 10 different languages. Ortiz fought for the French Foreign Legion and was an officer of the U.S. Marines. He performed tasks for the Office of Strategic Services, a wartime intelligence agency of the United States and a predecessor of the CIA. Decorated with almost 20 medals, Ortiz returned to civilian life at the end of World War II and became an actor, playing alongside John Wayne. One of the stories from Ortiz's service took place in German-occupied France and has become legendary. One evening, in the spring of 1944, a tall, handsome man came into a small French cafe for a drink. Inside, there was a group of German soldiers from the 157th Mountain Division. These soldiers were swearing and carrying on, loudly throwing insults at the Allies, the American Marine Corps, and American President Roosevelt. The man sat down in the corner of the cafe and watched the Wehrmacht's defiant soldiers for a while. After a bit, he left, only to return in different clothes. When this man appeared for the second time, he was described as wearing a long raincoat. He ordered a round for the German officers, and when the alcohol was served, he took off his coat. The Germans were shocked to see a U.S. Marine uniform. In his hand, he held a Colt M1911 and had it aimed at the surprised Germans. The Marine demanded the Germans give a toast to President Roosevelt. The Germans obeyed. The Marine then demanded they perform another toast, this time in honor of the American Marines. They obeyed. A few sources claim that the officers were later killed, but Ortiz, in an interview years later, said that this was not the case and that he let them live for propaganda purposes. This story greatly strengthened the morale of the French resistance and frightened the Germans. In 1932, when Ortiz was only 19, he decided to enlist in the French Foreign Legion and was sent to Algeria for training. After he completed his training, Ortiz fought against the Berbers in the Rif Mountains in northern Morocco. He was repeatedly decorated and became promoted to sergeant. Ortiz had such an impactful impression that his supervisors offered the rank second lieutenant and a French citizenship, but only if he remained in the French Foreign Legion. After fighting for 5 years in the African wilderness, Ortiz decided to return to the United States and pursue a career in the Hollywood film industry. After the German invasion of France, Pierre Ortiz decided to enlist again in the Foreign Legion. On his journey back to Europe, the ship he was sailing on was attacked by a U-boat. Ortiz, among other survivors, were rescued by a French liner. When they finally reached their destination, Ortiz was serving as a lieutenant. In 1940, Ortiz became wounded while blowing up fuel depots and was captured. He was held captive for approximately a year and a half until he managed to escape and return to America. Shortly after his return, on December 7, 1941, the bombing of Pearl Harbor took place and the United States formally joined World War II. In 1942, Ortiz joined the American Marines and was sent to a recruiting camp in North Carolina on Parris Island. He proudly wore his French decorations from his service in the Foreign Legion. Immediately, this was noticed by the instructors, and they demanded for full documentation and all materials relating to his previous service. After learning about his service with the Foreign Legion, Ortiz was promoted to second lieutenant in the American Marine Corps. In October of 1942, Ortiz completed a parachute jumping course, which for him was very easy as he had done it over 150 times while serving with the Foreign Legion. Shortly after he completed this, he was promoted to captain and sent to Africa, where he began working with the British Special Operations Executive (SOE) forces. During one of these battles, Ortiz was hit by machine gun fire in the hand and leg. Despite these injuries, he managed to crawl close enough to destroy the vehicle the fire was coming from with a grenade. Pierre Ortiz was sent back to Washington, D.C., where he was treated for his injuries. While he was healing, Ortiz was being prepared for his next mission. After healing and further training, Ortiz, alongside 2 other soldiers, British Colonel Thackwayte and Frenchman André Falco, were dropped in the Alps on January 6, 1944, with weapons and supplies. Their mission was to assess the combat value of the French resistance and to organize, train, and equip them. The 3 men soon found the number of people they needed who were willing to fight the occupant, but the problem was a lack of weapons. The commandos took care of putting together the training camps, field hospitals, and even provided money to the families of partisans. Soon, the guerrilla fighters were ready to act. Armed with weapons from airdrops, they carried out numerous attacks led by Ortiz, who was always wearing an American Marine uniform. At the same time, Ortiz was helping to shoot down English pilots. While organizing an escape, his men managed to steal 10 vehicles from the Germans and then, using false documents which were created by Ortiz, managed to take the Englishmen to the Spanish border. Ortiz was later awarded the Order of the British Empire for his actions. The mission, codenamed Union, ended on May 20th, 1944, and was labeled a success. The soldiers were transported back to the British Isles, and Ortiz received the Navy Cross Medal and a promotion to Major. The next operation, which was codenamed Union 2, began on August 1st, 1944. Ortiz, along with Captain Joe Coolidge, 5 other Marines, and French officer Joseph Arcelon, were dropped in the French Alps. This mission began with tragedy as a soldier's parachute failed and Sergeant Perry was killed during landing. 2 weeks later, the commandos came across a German convoy in the village of Centron. A fight broke out, and the inhabitants had to remind them of the possible punishment which could be received for helping. Ortiz decided he would surrender his unit, but on the condition that the Nazis spared the civilians. The German commander agreed to Ortiz's conditions. When Ortiz's soldiers left the buildings, the officer went into a frenzy as he expected to fight with a unit the size of a company. Ortiz's decision, which saved the lives of so many people, he would later receive another Navy Cross Medal. Ortiz was interrogated many times, but never revealed anything to his torturers. Ortiz spent the rest of the war in a POW camp. He made repeated attempts to escape, and in April 1945, he escaped with 3 other prisoners while they were being moved to another camp. After 10 days, having learned that prisoners had taken over the camp from the Germans, the escapees decided to return. The camp was liberated on April 26th. Ortiz left his active service in the Marines in 1946 and returned to work in Hollywood. 2 films were made loosely based on his life, and Ortiz also appeared in a number of films, including John Wayne's Rio Grande. Ortiz remained in the Marines Reserves until 1955, when he retired with the rank colonel. Pierre Peter Ortiz died after losing the battle against cancer at the age of 74 on May 16, 1988. In August 1994, the town of Centron renamed the city center during a large ceremony. The city center is now named Place Colonel Pierre Ortiz.